Welcome to Raptors Weekly. Andrew joins me. Hey, Andrew.
Hello, Zarar. How are you?
Good, man. Good. We were supposed to record this podcast last night after the Lakers loss, but on second thought, I'm glad we didn't because I think we would be too emotional at the time after what Kobe did to us again and again. So it's good that we've had a 24-hour break and now we're recording it around 10:30 p.m. the day after because maybe our thoughts will be more composed and will make a little bit more sense.
It's true. I was so overcome with emotion and angry that I immediately fell asleep and we were unable to do the podcast.
I don't know. I was a little upset about the calls that Kobe got, but we'll talk about all that momentarily. But let's start off with the DeMar DeRozan injury he suffered against the Dallas Mavericks. You know, he drove to his right and he got to the just below the right elbow and towards the baseline, and he slipped and he fell and he injured his groin. And depending on who you read, he could be out from anywhere between 7 days to all the way to 3 months. So we just don't know yet what the degree of the tear is. But are you surprised right now, Andrew, that they haven't fired all the mop girls and mop boys yet?
I'm not sure if he slipped and that's what caused the tear when he tore his adductor longus tendon, or if the fall kind of happened as a result of it just sort of randomly giving out. It's a strange injury in that way. I mean, if they got a clear crew with the Vim, is it Vim or Swiffer now? I can't keep up with this. Is it the Swiffer crew?
I believe it's Swiffer with the Febreze, though.
Okay, Swiffer with the that could be the problem right there. We're getting liquids involved.
Yeah, so that was a little downer. So when that injury happened, my reaction was that, okay, so at this point you look at how you want to adjust the starting lineup. My take on it was that maybe we should start James Johnson. That way you would kind of maintain that bench impact the Raptors have been having of late. Keep Vasquez off the bench, keep Lou Williams where he's doing well, and get James Johnson into the starting lineup. He brings more defense. Of course, you're going to lose DeMar's offense. So were you surprised against the Lakers when he got Vasquez in the starting lineup?
My intuition was to say Johnson. I think I understand Vasquez. I know Casey talked about doing that because that was the lineup with Lowry and Vasquez together that was so effective last year down the stretch, and especially in the Brooklyn series. I know that the starting lineup really relies on DeMar and Lowry for so much of the scoring, and I think that's kind of the motivation where you kind of need someone to have the ball in their hands and someone to help Lowry with just creating offense, and that core is not ready to sort of have Jonas take a big leap and have the ball in his hands. They're not ready for Ross to be a distributor or to have plays called for him on a regular basis. They're not necessarily ready for James Johnson to step in and have a place there. So Vasquez is sort of the easiest thing to do, but I think in the long run, and especially against certain matchups, it does make sense to put James Johnson there, and I'd like to see him get a chance if that's something that works.
Vasquez fared pretty well. He started off like a man on fire. He was 8 for 16 in the game, scored 19 points. Defensively, not so great, but none of the Raptors were. And they ended up losing 122-129 to the Lakers. The worst team in the West beats the best team in the East. Impressions on Kobe Bryant, first of all. He was 11 for 24 in the game and for 31 points, 11 rebounds, 12 assists, triple-double. Man, I knew the Lakers were struggling, but deep down I just knew that Kobe would somehow wake up for the Raptors like he always does. Yeah, we said on the last podcast the Raptors were going to win this game. It's going to be easy, but deep down you just knew that with Kobe, now that especially with DeMar out now, he would just see this as an opportunity to shine.
Kobe's the most frustrating person to cheer against because you can play perfect defense against him, and he won't kick the ball out. He just keeps trying, fake after fake and stepping around and looking and getting his look. And the shot clock will finally tick down, or you'll get the ball off him and he'll scramble. And he just turns and fades and throws up a last-second prayer. And there are games that seem to happen against us all the time where those shots just drop, and they just kept hurting every time.
Yeah, and he also killed us with his passing because he was making passes that I haven't seen him make in a very long time. It's almost like in these last 2 years of his career or whatever time he's got left, he's doing all the things he never maybe got to do with Shaq and all Gasol there. This is just like playground time for him. So I saw him making passes, behind-the-back passes, in-traffic passes that were high risk, but he threaded the needle on every single one of them.
Kobe Bryant is maybe the most underrated passer in the NBA. He's capable of being maybe like one of the best distributors in the league, and he'll go on stretches where he does this. Obviously he didn't play last year, but the season before there was a stretch where, much like now, he was being over-criticized, or I should say appropriately criticized for his shot selection and the volume of shots he was taking. And he seems to respond with that every once in a while by just deciding in a Wilt Chamberlain-like way, like, okay, well, I'm just going to lead the team in assists for the next little while. I don't know what. I mean, Kobe's always trying to prove something to someone, and that's I think what he's trying to do. But I mean, it was killing us.
So what do you think of the officials? I thought a couple of late calls in the fourth quarter, especially one of the and ones that he got against Johnson, where there was absolutely no contact on there, and he got the call. But at that point, man, he's Kobe Bryant. His reputation carries some weight. So at that point, you expect those calls to go against you, especially on the road.
Yeah, I think it seemed, especially in the first 3 quarters of the game, that we were getting, the Lakers were getting the benefit of the whistle when it seemed like the Raptors were always going to just, were always on the precipice of about to pull away and beat the home team. And it seemed almost like there was a subconscious desire by the referees to try to appease the crowd and do what they could to keep the game close. I'm not saying necessarily consciously, but I think that's a thing that does happen subconsciously. But Kobe Bryant continues to be, he does something to get the calls besides just the respect. I think the way he treats the officials, he's either trying to joke around with them and be friendly, or when the call doesn't go his way, he doesn't pout about it. He'll try to almost patronize them and make it seem like he's disappointed in them, and then they have this desire to sort of please him. Like, come on, Joe. Like, Joe, that okay? All right, you're calling that. Okay, you missed that. You made a mistake. And then I think he's just trying to sort of mind game them into giving him that call.
Yeah, and he was being guarded by Terrence Ross, who ended up having a good statistical game, 8 for 12, but 20 points. But as I was watching the game, I just felt myself being mad at Terrence Ross for the defense he was playing. Like, I can't explain it. At the end of the game, I was surprised he was 8 for 12 because I was angry at him for like 4 quarters and half of overtime.
No, I understand what you're saying. Terrence Ross seems to come and go in such stretches where he either seems invisible on the court, he seems like he's getting beat for buckets, or he's hit the last 3 shots in a 90-second stretch of time. I think that it's a lot easier to forgive getting beaten by Kobe Bryant. I mean, he looked like a fool reaching and then falling on that one Kobe step back. But I think the problem that I'm seeing with Terrence is he's either unable to fight around screens and and stick with his man when he's running around trying to keep with him, or he's just not interested in doing it. So I don't know whether it's a lack of aggression or it's very hard to do and he's struggling with it, but he's not. You're right in that he's really not having a time of it. Did you see our comrade is not with us today, William's response on Twitter about this?
Yeah, I think Will had some money on this game, and clearly midway through the second quarter, he was not quite happy. I think Terrence Ross he picked out in particular. He goes, Terrence Ross is driving every Raptors fan crazy. Pathetic defense on Kobe, not doing much on offense either. He goes on and on. I think he goes, at one point he goes, Lowry's trying to win the game, Terrence Ross trying to do the opposite. He wasn't quite pleased, and I gotta agree with him for the most part. And you said like maybe he doesn't have the strength, and maybe he doesn't want to. I think one leads to the other. It's so easy to wipe him out with a screen.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost a bad idea to put him in the situation to begin with. Forget about fighting through the screen. It's just he never does that unless it's one of those like lazy set screens with the offense kind of wants you to like just fight through because there's some other motion going on the other side of the court. Like, I don't expect Terrence Ross to be a big contributor with DeRozan out. And even though he had a decent offensive game here, I thought he was terrible defensively throughout the game. I don't want to lay the loss on Terrence Ross because there were other culprits as well. I think as a team, we were very slow. I think they spoke to the assistant coach at the end of the at halftime, and he's like, we're just a step slow in everything. Maybe it's the LA nightlife. I don't know what it was. But the other guy I just want to move on to next is Valanciunas. Again, statistically, 13 rebounds, 9 points. But, man, you cannot let Jordan Hill have a season best game against you.
Jordan Hill quietly bullies around most of the bigs in the league for rebounds. I mean, he hit a lot of shots, and I mean, Jonas has struggled to a certain degree with his post defense, and especially with larger, stronger guys. But I think Jordan Hill is someone who is more of a punchline by virtue of being on the Lakers and having his shot at the starting lineup look like someone just photoshopped blocks around his head with his hair. He's not that bad, which is a weird way to describe someone.
But still, Jonas' performance overall, like this is a front line that he should be overpowering, if not dominating at least.
Yeah, Jonas still has no idea. I think we've talked before with part of the problem with Terrence Ross is like it seems to just only occur to him in spare moments. Like, oh, I think I'm actually pretty good, and then he tries to assert himself just for little stretches. It's the same thing with Jonas where he acts like he's one of the smallest guys in the court. Like he's got to get rid of the ball quickly before someone bullies him or blocks his shot. Like he can't step into someone. Like he's not a 285-pound, 7-foot monster of a man. And he really struggles to assert himself physically that way. And I'm not sure who has insight into that if we want to play sports psychologist here, but it's a problem.
You look at the touches he gets, because one of the things we always complain about is that maybe he doesn't get enough touches. Maybe the Raptors don't play enough inside out, and maybe we should go into Jonas more. But when you look at his shot attempts for the game, he had 10 shots. He got a lot of touches. Like, I don't know if he deserves any more touches than he gets, because the touches he does get, he seems to almost waste them.
Yeah, he hesitates. He does the pump fake, for which the counter is another pump fake that no one in the league buys on. He doesn't move the ball. The only time he moves the ball out of the post again is if he's just going to reset and kick it back outside. There's no play that develops off of it. If he doesn't score on his post look, then it's a dead possession probably 80% of the time.
Like, yeah, I mean, I can't blame Lowry. He was 10 for 28 in this game for maybe looking off Jonas after he's given him the ball 6 times and he's done not much with it. He's not going to get the ball 7. Tim Chisholm wrote about this in his piece. He goes, maybe the Raptors are becoming too good too fast for Jonas Valanciunas. Maybe this was supposed to be development time for Valanciunas or Ross for that matter, but they've become good in a short period of time, and now there's more expected of both of these two, and they're still kind of adjusting to their role which demands a lot more than maybe they had thought they would need to contribute at this point.
Well, I mean, if there is a silver lining to the DeRozan injury, it's that they're going to be forced to lean on Ross and Jonas more, not have them carry the team, but they're both going to get more minutes. I mean, I don't remember the last time I ever saw Jonas play the entire first quarter and Ross play the first 10 minutes of the game at the same time. I don't think I've ever seen that happen, and it happened in the Lakers game. They were both getting a little bit more looks, but it's less important that they suddenly become who we expect or want them to be right now than it is that they get a chance to try and do that, because we are much better than we expected to be at this point, and that's great. But if you don't allow Jonas and Ross to develop more, and especially Jonas, then you're really going to limit your team's ceiling come the time for the playoffs, when you really need Jonas against certain matchups to be a scorer, when you really need him to be able to play 35 minutes some nights. If he's not comfortable, if he doesn't feel like there's confidence in him, and if he's not able to go to that game that he's put the work into, then you're going to be really limited, and it's going to be difficult for you to get through to the next round. And I'm not that worried about him missing shots right now if it leads to a more comfortable, more established game in the long run, but you need to start seeing results.
This is a good question, actually. Like, are we okay with the Raptors mid-season doing some development work on Valanciunas, maybe feeding them 20 touches a game or what have you, even if it means losing games in the short term?
I mean, 20 touches is a lot. I'm okay with them trying to get him. I mean, maybe 10 to 15 shots, 10 to 12 shots a game is probably the wheelhouse you're looking for right now. And then in matchups when you have the chance to, really trying to feed that and develop the confidence in it. But I don't necessarily think you need to sacrifice the game. You don't want to bench him outright for someone like Hansbrough on a night against the Lakers at this point in the season. I think that's maybe somewhere where I'm more in line with saying, you know what, we might not win this game. Let's try to get some confidence developed. Let's try to get some reps in here than winning every single night. If you can win as well, that's great. But I do think there is something to the long game instead of the game right in front of you.
Yeah. And there was this one play in the Laker game which just bugged me the most, and it was they finally got JV a post up at some point in the fourth quarter. I think it was the third maybe, and Ross cuts across right where JV's trying to post up, and Ross's man just happens to be right next to where JV's posting up, and he just picks off, and they go on a fast break and score. It's one of those plays that you're like, oh my God, are you guys even on the same page in this game? And that was, you see examples of that kind of play sprinkled throughout that Laker game, which makes you wonder like what the preparation for that game was.
Yeah. As you said before, it could be the classic case of the road trip out. Things have been going well, and it's the first road trip in a while, and you're out in a city that everyone likes to have fun in, and maybe you're out the night before having a little bit too much fun, or just not focusing enough on what you're doing. But I think it also looked like most of the players on the team were either unsure of what they were supposed to do, missing DeMar and sort of what role they were supposed to take, and they're a little more hesitant than normal, or they seemed like they felt like they had to do everything without DeMar. Like Kyle Lowry went into his last 2-minute mode of the game with about 25 minutes left in the game, where he felt like he had to just go nuts and bulldog everything and get to the rim and just, I mean, he was sprinting around the court going nuts on both ends of the floor, which is great, but it turned into a little bit more turnovers than he usually would. His shot wasn't going down. I think some other guys were trying to force shots and trying to step up and play that role.
Yeah.
and they'll need to settle down and find out who they're going to be in the meantime, more efficiently than just trying to, I got this or you got this. It's okay. Well, how are we going to adjust for this? How are we going to keep playing the way we were before, just without DeMar?
It's like Lou Williams were 5 for 17 in this game as well. Again, trying to force things. It's almost like because they don't have maybe a strong system in place to fall back on when one of their big guys goes injured, they try to overcompensate individually, and that's what I saw in the Laker game. Lowry and Lou Williams really trying to, or even Patterson for that matter, forcing some shots up, trying to compensate because they just didn't know how to handle DeRozan not being there, because DeRozan is their the highest usage guy on the team. So because they're not like a team like the Spurs, which has a system to fall back on, they maybe try to do a little bit more individually because that's all they know.
Yeah, I mean the system that they run, if you want to call it that, is just they have an idea of where certain plays like the ball on the floor and how to get it to them and how to try and get them a look on it. And DeMar takes by far the most possessions out of that, but they do have plays and they do have basic schemes to try to get Lou Williams the ball on the left side of the arc. They have plays to get Terrence Ross pull-ups from the outside. They have plays to get Lowry running to the rim. They have a lot of different pick and roll looks with Vasquez. They have things that they run to try and involve more than one person to get a look, and they weren't even really running those a lot of the times. It really did break down to, as you were saying, a lot of one-on-one, a lot of I should shoot this or someone has to shoot this.
Well, let's see how they adjust in the next game. But before we break and talk about the Dallas game, we should just give some love to Kyle Lowry. Poor shooting game, 10 for 28, but man, he tried to win that game single-handedly down the stretch and almost did. If Kobe wasn't a man on fire against James Johnson, this could have turned out the other way.
Or if we had got one last possession there at the end.
So yeah, so there was this whole question about the Raptors calling a timeout, which the refs ignored with 1.2 seconds left in regulation. It appeared that Kyle Lowry signaled for timeout and the ref was right there, but he ignored it. And I think at the time Leo and Devlin said, well, you got to call a timeout here. But later, after I had posted the video on Raptors Republic, people pointed out that the Raptors had already used up all their timeouts at that point.
Oh, so it's a Chris Webber scenario?
Yeah, it was like so the refs kind of did him a favor, but not calling a technical. And I looked up the rules, and holy shit, man, they're confusing because it's not like you get X amount of timeouts per half. It's like you get 6 timeouts a game, and it's convoluted by a TV timeout. If you don't use a timeout, you lose it. It's a hot mess. So I'm going to take some smart people's word on this and say that the Raptors actually used up all 3 timeouts and did not have a timeout to use. So they could have actually lost the game with 1.2 seconds left by a technical free throw, but instead the refs just chose to ignore it.
Or they could have won it in overtime and they didn't. So we don't have a lot to complain about.
Yeah, so it's on the road. Lesson learned, I guess. So if there's one thing to come from here, it's that even if you're facing the worst team in the conference, you still got to show up for it properly. And defensively, the Raptors once again didn't. They gave up 49% shooting against a Laker team that's just been horrible. They just can't defend. And what pissed me off probably were Robert Sacre's 2 baskets, which just felt like a kick in the face, right? And his celebration too. The celebration just felt so bad. I just want to punch the TV.
No sympathy for the Canadian Robert Sacre.
It's like when Scrubs score against you, man. It's the worst feeling.
The Scrubs score against everyone, man. The Laker game, the other thing to take from that is the Lakers took a whole lot of ill-advised shots that just dropped. Yeah. They shot very high percentages on bad shots, and that's something that happens sometimes.
Hey, would you trade Nick Young? Would you get Nick Young for Terrence Ross?
No. This whole Swaggy P thing that is either ironically fun or silly fun or I don't know. I'm so out on Nick Young. Yeah. I've seen him in person twice. I was incredibly underwhelmed. Oh. No.
What were you underwhelmed by?
He was on the 70. When I say that's terrible 76ers team, it's really difficult to distinguish which year I'm talking about now. But he was on the 76ers 2 years ago, and he's just like he's not that engaged. He never seems like he's using the full extent of his athleticism. In that particular game, I saw him get blocked at the rim 3 different times, just trying to get there and not seeing a cutter. Like when he goes to the rim, he's going just putting up shots from nowhere. Like throwing up threes and holding and then airballing them.
He's got a bit of a J.R. Smith gene, that's all.
Yeah, and that's the thing about those guys is when they're hot, they look like they're amazing because they're playing with a certain degree of confidence and they're taking hard shots, and it looks like wow, that guy must be great. And then you look at the whole instead of just the one single example, and you find out like, oh, they're flashy, and that's why they get all the attention, but their numbers don't actually dictate that they're very good.
Yeah, Brandon Jennings probably falls into that category as well.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so That's that for the Laker game. Lesson learned. Let's move on. When we come back after the break, we'll talk about Dallas. Welcome back to part 2 of Raptors Weekly, and we're going to talk about the Dallas game, which seemed ages ago. And before we talk about that, Andrew, have you checked out this this podcast called Serial that's been hitting the airwaves lately? Have you checked it out?
I have heard of it. I haven't actually listened to it. I've just heard described the idea of the show.
It's pretty good because
where are we going with this?
It talks about. I'll tell you where we're going with this.
Is this like an in-podcast ad that I was unaware of?
No, there's no ads here. By the way, listener, if you want to sponsor this podcast, just hit us at raptorsrepublic@gmail.com.
Yeah, send money, send sandwiches, whatever.
Yeah, we'll sponsor. We'll take in anything. But back to Serial. It's a show where the guy's looking for an alibi for something that happened like 6 weeks ago. And he's been asked to recall where you were 6 weeks ago, and obviously he can't because it's 6 weeks ago. And this Dallas game was about like 4 days ago, and I can't recall much at all about this game, except that I was really annoyed by Chandler Parsons scoring so easily, it appeared.
Yeah, Chandler Parsons is kind of annoying, so that makes sense. I remember Tyson Chandler being really tall. I remember Monta Ellis being kind of fast. Are these things refreshing it?
Yeah,
Dirk Nowitzki can maybe shoot.
A little bit. Brandon Wright getting some easy baskets near the rim. Jay Crowder hitting a shot. Yeah, it's just the Raptors on this one. They started off with a 10-0 lead, and at that point, Will, again manning the Raptors Republic Twitter account, goes, "The Raptors are up 10-0 against the Mavericks. Holy shit!" Little did he know that they would follow that up with like a 26-4 run or something ridiculous like that, and basically
assume would explode.
and basically assume control of the game in the first quarter.
I mean, it's worth noting that the Mavericks are on pace to be the most efficient, the highest scoring offense per 100 possessions of all time right now. Like, they're not kind of a good offense. They're a historically good offense at the current rate. They'll probably slow down a little bit, I would have to think, but they are very, very good. They're very difficult to defend, and they have athletic centers, and they also have small ball fours, and we really struggle to guard both of those things.
Yeah, it's like guys like Aminu, who came off the bench and it was 5 for 6. It's like those points hurt us like really bad. Like, I can live with Monta Ellis getting 30 points because he's a great scorer. Chandler Parsons, he's annoying, but he's crafty. And I can't believe we fell for his pump fakes at the 3-point line because he does that on every single play. Tyson Chandler is a great player. We get that. But it's guys like Aminu off the bench, 5 for 6, which maybe our defense didn't really account for. Those are the points that kind of annoyed us, yeah.
Amino's a freak athlete, and he's really been a trick-or-treat player for them this year. He seems like he's either, a huge 12 points and 20 minutes of great defense and points off the fast break and getting turnovers for them, or he's just a brick machine that is on the court for 5 minutes and then goes back to the bench.
For the Raptors in that game, again, they don't get blown out ever, and that was true in this game as well. They tried to make a late comeback, got within 4 or so, but really you knew that Dallas always had control. Or you had more of a sense that when Dallas needed to score, they would find a way. And there's almost a feeling of resignation in that run the Raptors made late in the fourth quarter because you just knew that Dallas would always be able to score when they wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, the possession that really ended the game was they tried to trap in the corner, and it looked like they had it, and they backed off, forgetting that someone hadn't picked up the dribble yet, and gave up an easy layup, unfortunately. But I don't think that anyone was really upset about that loss. I think that playing the best offensive team in the league, having DeMar go down, and having it be as close as it was not devastating, though.
They did shoot, the Raptors did 42%, but then it gave up 47% shooting again. This trend of giving up opponent high field goal percentage is holding quite steady, and it's a little bit scary because even though the Raptors have a good defensive rating in terms of advanced stats, like one weakness they have is they give up very good opponent field goal percentage, which I think may come back to bite them. And I think it has to do with our defense relying so much on forcing turnovers rather than playing good, solid half-court defense.
Mm-hmm. My suspicion is that Dwayne Casey's agreeing with you. I know that a lot of his frustration with the team comes from breaking out of the scheme and him trying to manage how they're gambling for steals and how they're sort of dropping back into the lane off the wings. And we're giving up a tremendous amount of wide-open three-pointers right now, which is really bumping the average. I think that that's a little bit of a small sample size number as well. I think that those numbers are going to come down but like we've just faced some hot shooting. But at the same time, we've given up a lot of open 3-pointers, and this team has really struggled to figure out how they're going to guard against small balls whenever that comes up. I mean, a lot of the small ball teams they played was before James Johnson came back from his injury, and that's kind of the ideal person at that spot, especially with Amir Johnson banged up, but it's not ideal.
We have a team that should be able to play good small ball because we have a guy in Patrick Patterson who's kind of made for that. He's built for small ball type basketball, but he's had a slow start to the season, which is maybe negating our advantage when teams go small against us. So maybe our form is almost like indirectly dependent on how well Patterson performs off the bench because Vasquez is now coming along. Lou Williams has been coming along. Patterson's probably the last bench guy that we need to kind of step up to last year's levels for us to maybe get more consistency and match up better in lineups against like Dallas when they go small.
Patterson's tricky because offensively he's a great small ball, if you will, small ball four if he's hitting a shot because he's capable of shooting near at or slightly above league average from the 3-point line, which is very good for a power forward. But that shot is missing at the moment. The other side is defensively, he's not actually that great of a small ball guy because he's not really quick enough to guard someone like a Chandler Parsons or a Markieff Morris, someone who's going to be driving in off the 3-point line or moving around and cutting. And he's not a great rebounder against anyone his own size or even under his size. So him playing the 5 or the 4 is not super ideal. And all of our center, I mean, Amir is actually a very good small ball center as far as guarding someone who's going to go out to the 3-point line and him knowing when to help back in, when to cheat, how to get back out and chase the line. But his speed and his ability to play deep minutes in games has really been hampered.
I agree with your Patterson take on the rebounding, but not so much on defensively. I think he's been fairly adequate in terms of defending smaller guys. It's just that when he does do that, he's not great at coming back into rebounding position and getting the rebound. So I see your point that he's not a great rebounder, but it's because he's so overcommitted to the perimeter, trying to defend pick and rolls or trying to hedge out or trying to cover lots of areas that when the shot actually goes up, he's not great at gaining position when he's maybe at a slight disadvantage to begin with.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in all fairness, it's a lot to ask for anyone of that size to guard. Like that's one reason why small ball has been so effective, is that it's so difficult for a big to get out to the 3-point line to guard someone, especially if that's a quicker player. I think there's a lot fewer teams who actually have ideal small ball lineups than there are teams who try it. But when they have the right personnel, it's just a nightmare for any big if you can't punish them on the other end for it.
Sometimes I wonder like how good the Raptors might be if Landry Fields was actually a healthy contributing player because he fits the bill of the type of guy you would use in a small ball lineup, but for whatever reason he's just not even on the radar, and it's basically a wasted roster spot at this point.
Which is the case for spots 12 through 15 on most NBA teams, but I think that.
But he's unexpectedly in that 12 to 15, isn't he? Like he's not. When we signed Steamsma, you knew he's a 12 to 15 guy. Even Caballo, you know he's a 12 to 15 guy. But Landry Fields, you don't necessarily equate him with being a 12 to 15 guy. He just slid down into that role on the bench. But
slid down. I mean, that contract was an overpay for the moment it happened, and it seemed to happen for one of two reasons: either because they were trying to get someone or something to try to help attract Steve Nash here, or they were also trying to. The Knicks were one of the other teams that were expected to sign Steve Nash, and I think the Raptors were trying to tie up.
Yeah, it was the poison pill contract. It was so silly.
Yeah, it didn't pan out. I mean, I don't think Landry Fields is ever going to be that person. Ideally, I think this goes back to Valanciunas, and this is one reason why we need him to really develop. Because if you don't have the right personnel to guard small ball really well, then the only way to counter it is to become really good at punishing teams who try to go small ball against you. Where if they're not hitting all of their threes, you just abuse them so badly on the glass and you score so easily down low and in the pick and roll that they have to adjust to you instead.
And I always talk about this. Let's not adapt to teams. Let's force them to play our game. And if our game means going big and throwing the ball on the Valanciunas, picking up foul trouble and all that, let's do that. But by the same caveat, he's not playing that well, so I don't know how much KC can rely on that either.
Well, I mean, that's why Memphis has been the team that has quietly scared the shit out of everyone for the last 3 or 4 years, because when Gasol and Randolph are both going, if they can get adequate guard play, you cannot play small against them, and you have to adapt to what they're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. So you got to be at a certain level before you can assert yourself. It's a fair point. Yeah. So Valanciunas probably isn't isn't there just yet, and hopefully he does get there at some point.
Give him those minutes.
Let's take a quick break. Think about more ideas that can sponsor this podcast. Welcome to part 3 of Raptors Weekly. Looking ahead to the schedule, it starts off in Sacramento, the first night of a back-to-back. The Raptors are in Utah the following night. But let's talk about Sacramento first. We get to see Rudy Gay again, who's having a strong season and has signed a contract extension, Andrew. Did you know that?
I did know that.
Took a pay cut.
Yeah, he did not. It was not as big of a news as when he signed the contract he signed last time, which is... this is kind of great for Rudy Gay, whereas he's playing well in Sacramento, and anytime someone brings up Rudy Gay or Sacramento, it seems like the universal reaction is, oh, that's right, Rudy Gay's on Sacramento. He's not the big guy. He's sort of found a role where he fits into. This is DeMarcus Cousins' team, and he's doing much better in it. Good for him.
For whatever it's worth, that's the natural reaction of any player who's in Sacramento, not just Rudy Gay.
I mean, fair enough.
Did you know Jason Terry's in Sacramento?
I did.
Darren Collison, Travis Outlaw, Reggie Evans.
Darren Collison, as everyone thought, like, what is Sacramento doing? And then he's the first player in 15 years to go to Sacramento as a free agent and then suddenly thrive.
Maybe the Kings are on the upswing here. So one guy the Raptors may not be facing is DeMarcus Cousins, who has eaten them alive in previous occasions. He missed the game due to illness, the last game against Memphis, which the Kings lost 97-85. Right now he's listed as questionable to face the Raptors. He did not practice on Monday, so we'll see how that goes. So some head-to-head matchups here. DeMarcus Cousins versus Jonas Valanciunas. He's averaging 24.7 points and 10 rebounds against JV, whereas JV is averaging 9.7 points and 6.3 rebounds. So he's been tearing him up. So we talked about in the last segment about small ball. So here's your chance to play big man ball, JV versus Cousins. It's time to show up, JV.
I mean, yes, like DeMarcus has just torn the Raptors as a team apart, and JV as well. But it sounds terrible when you say that DeMarcus is going for 24.7 and 10 against JV until you realize that against the league as a whole and against the mostly big, mostly awesome Western Conference, DeMarcus Cousins is averaging 23.5 points and 12.6 rebounds just on a nightly basis. Quietly, if you're not paying attention to NBA Twitter or the league as a whole, or loudly if you are following it, it's really difficult to say that DeMarcus Cousins is not in the top 4 or 5 in the MVP discussion right now. He's a beast. Boogie.
The talent was never in doubt. It was always a question of whether his head's going to be straight. So this year he seems to have found it, and the Kings, man, they're looking all right, and this should be another test for the Raptors on many fronts, because they also have great guard play in Rudy Gay, as you mentioned. Collison's having a good season there, so they got weapons on offense which the Raptors have to counter, and I envision a similar style game like the Lakers, where it could get up and down the court, but this time the Kings actually have a punch in the middle with Boogie, so the Raptors are in it quite tough, especially without DeMar DeRozan here.
Yeah, DeMarcus Cousins is one of the most difficult guys in the league to guard. Sacramento likes to run a lot. They like to play fast. There's some opportunity there. I know Kyle Lowry has done well in the past against guards like Darren Collison, who like to run, who are maybe not always the most conservative with the basketball. And it would be nice to see if he can get some steals out of that, and if they can turn those into points, or if they can just control the ball and control the pace. Sacramento's been great, but they are still a team who, if you force them to adapt to you, is very prone to turnovers and can go cold from the floor.
They were 1 for 11 from 3 against Memphis, so they're liable to have those kind of games because they don't have the greatest outside shooting right now. They do get to the line quite a bit, especially through Boogie and Gay as well, so you got to watch out for that. But if you force them into perimeter shots, keep them on the perimeter, maybe sag a little bit more, force guys like Gay to have shoot jumpers, the Raptors have a chance here on the road. But last year we lost this fixture, so this year it's going to be tough again. The next night in Utah on the road again, the Jazz played us really tough the last time they were in Toronto, and this should be no different, really.
Yep, young team. They play hard, they run. The Jazz even without DeMar, the Jazz should be a much more manageable game. But that West Coast back-to-back, where you're playing the second night in elevation against Utah, who again young and not always, but will occasionally play fast, that can be a tough matchup just for the physical demands alone. Although neither Utah or Sacramento on the whole are playing at nearly as fast of a pace as I thought. It just seems like when you watch those games, there's a lot of fast break.
The altitude does play a part whenever you go to Denver and Utah, but it's the travel that precedes playing on the at that altitude that hurts more, and the Raptors are going to face that on a back-to-back no less. So
Yeah, that's the sneaky part about those Utah-Denver games. They oftentimes come in unison, and I'm sure that if someone looked at it, whenever there's a back-to-back or the middle of a road trip where it's Denver-Utah back-to-back, I'd be very surprised if teams won more than 40% of the time on the second game of those nights. But
yeah.
they're right in the middle of the country, surrounded by mountains, and they're on your way somewhere. So you always play them in the midst of a stretch of road games because it doesn't make any sense to fly there for one game.
Mm-hmm.
It's one reason why Denver's always does so well at home. Bit of an advantage, but I mean, luckily neither of those teams are very good this year. We get to see Gordon Hayward with his Brooklyn hipster haircut.
Chalk this one up as a loss for me because
really,
I don't see it happening here.
We talked about this earlier on this year. I think that against Enes Kanter, for whatever reason, the young European bigs that Jonas either grew up playing with or has played in Euroball against, those seem to be the only guys that he's willing to play physical against. That he's just, that's what he's established, and he goes hard at Enes Kanter, and he puts his body into him, and he plays physical. So I'm looking forward to that matchup for that reason alone, just seeing that bring out that kind of Jonas.
And he's always angry too, right? Like you ever see when he misses a chippy or something, when he's trudging back down the court, he's like muttering to himself.
I think the problem with him is he feels like he's at, I always feel like the way that Casey's coached, Casey's a brilliant coach, but I feel like the biggest criticism of him I have is the way he deals with young players. Because instead of building them up, it seems like he has this atmosphere where maybe he just has two guys in Jonas and Ross who are a certain personality type that require a little bit more attention or just a little different style of coaching. But both of them, and especially Jonas, whenever he makes a mistake or he gets scored on or he misses a shot when he gets an opportunity, it's like he peeks over sheepishly to the bench expecting to get yanked, like the cane is going to come and pull him out. And I think that it's so hard to play when you're always worried like you're going to be pulled out if you make one mistake, or you're always on that precipice. I think you need to be trusted in order for you to start trusting yourself and develop that game. And I mean, I think that's where that comes from him. I think he's just worried that he's not going to get the opportunity, that he's disappointing someone, that he's going to get pulled out of the game, and he gets down on himself where, I mean, I agree with you that he doesn't have the right type of emotion, but I would love to see him play angry. I would love to see him emotionally invested in the game and just dominating.
Yeah, positive emotion, though. I guess you could criticize him for is that confidence management for young players. Both Ross and Valanciunas are two guys who appear to lose confidence very easily. And maybe that's a product of their personality, or maybe it's a product of the system or the atmosphere in the locker room or the way Casey manages them. We don't know. We can only speculate. But certainly, like, those are the two young players we have to monitor, and with Bruno coming up as well, we'll see how that goes. But confidence is something key in basketball, and none of those two seem to maintain it on a consistent basis. So after that, we got Cleveland, and since the last time we beat Cleveland, 110-93 in Cleveland, they've won all three, and all three have been blowouts. They beat Orlando 106-74, they beat Washington 113-87, and they beat Indiana 109-97. Granted, all three were home games, so Cleveland's on the up.
Yeah, Cleveland's is like the boxer that's gotten to sort of build up their resume against lesser opponents, just sort of beating down on people lately. And I don't think that from what I've seen they've figured it out as a team, but they've at least figured out that they have some guys on that team that are exceptionally good, and maybe they should use them in scenarios where they're able to thrive. It was not an easy game to win last time, but I think moving forward, Cleveland is going to be an extremely difficult place to play.
Yeah, and we picked them to win 60 games at the start of the season, or close to 60. And I think right now they're 8-7 at this point, so they've crossed the 500 mark. You expect them at this point to kind of put a run together because their schedule isn't terribly difficult at this point. They got Milwaukee and New York next, and then they got Toronto twice, both tough games, and they got OKC, New Orleans, Charlotte, Atlanta, Brooklyn. So it's the Eastern Conference, so they're going to pick up some wins here and challenge for top two at the least. So expect this to be a much tougher game than what the Raptors faced last time, with Cleveland kind of fell apart once the Raptors made a run, especially without DeRozan scoring now. This becomes a very challenging matchup, albeit it is at home in Toronto. So that game's on the Friday. Should be good.
I think that the key with Cleveland is that they're still a defensive mess, so you need to get after them early on, because if they get up ahead of you, they can just put their foot on your throat and just get ahead so much that when you're down 20 to LeBron James and Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving, it's easy to just sort of check out and let the game pass you by. But if you stick with them, this team is more than vulnerable enough on defense to lose to at least half the league the way they're playing right now.
Yeah, like that's a team you don't want to play small ball against under any circumstance.
No, absolutely not. You do not want to do anything to encourage them to put Kevin Love at the 5 and LeBron James at the 4. Because as soon as they figure out how to move the ball around offensively, how to get some guys that can actually shoot at the 2 and the 3, and put Love at the 5 and LeBron at the 4, they're just going to devastate people offensively.
What's your call on this one?
You know what? I like the way they played last time. I think either way it's a close game. I'll take the Raptors just because that's fun to say, but I think Kevin Love or LeBron James, if either one of them the 4 spot is gonna be what kills us if we lose.
Well, it is a back-to-back for them. They start a 3-game road trip, so the Raptors are the second night of a back-to-back. They're in New York the night before, so the Raptors have that going for them. The Raptors are coming back from their trip, but there's always that that stat about teams coming back from a West Coast swing always have a tough game at home to start with. So I don't know, it should be fun. I'm going to pick the Raptors mostly because of the back-to-back situation, and they played them well the first time, and I think Lowry won't let them lose no matter what LeBron does.
And look, if our bench can score, that's one of the problems with Vasquez not necessarily playing full time on the bench unit, but I think that's why, just to go back to the Lakers game, you saw Vasquez is the first one to come out of the game. They played Ross deep. And then I think they wanted Vasquez to play as many minutes with Lou Williams and James Johnson, the second unit, as they could. Cleveland's second unit is so bad, especially since they're not really playing any of their big names with it a lot. And if Kyrie is the only one out there with those guys, you can score points really quickly against them while Dion Waiters takes 5 bad shots and then goes back to the bench. And that's what we did when we beat them earlier on.
And you know who got playing time last time? Will Cherry.
Will Cherry.
Yeah, he's
your boy.
He was 1 for 4. He was 1 for 4 against the Pacers. He had 1 steal, and he was minus 16. So there you go. Yeah.
That's what happens when Lou Williams shoots and hits everything.
All right, man. I think we better leave it at that. So that's it for this week's show. We'll be back on Monday morning and having a reaction to all 3 games. Let's hope the Raptors get some good news in regards to the DeMar DeRozan injury, and we'll see you guys next week.
Give us that corporate sponsor money.
Yeah, give us the money. Anything. We'll take anything at this point. Just hit us at raptorsrepublic@gmail, whatever. Subway, Tim Hortons, I don't know, Joe's Body Shop, anything. All right, bye-bye.